remembered that I wanted to include the biography of Jangkya Röl-pay-dor-je. That is the first chapter of Emptiness Yoga. And I found it so, almost moved to tears right away just by recalling my diversion. This morning it's 21 pages, and it was so beautiful, so moving, and I was thinking to include it at the beginning of this book. I am thinking to include it if the publisher will allow me. And I had help from I actually didn't read the note. I imagine both Keizun Sambo and Geisha Tupten Gyatso. So I got much more detail. And there's a longer German biography. And I've got a professor from the German department, and he and I became pretty good friends over that. And I kind of forget what his contribution was. But in any case, he and I became good friends. But the two, the Geisha and Keizun Sambo, were tremendously helpful and provided details that really bring it to life. And since Kön-chog-jig-me-wang-po figures in Jangkya Röl-pay-dor-je's story, wow, just blew my. Amazing life.
About it. Tell us something about his life.
Excuse me? Tell us?
Yeah.
Well, as I think I have mentioned before, his monastery was burnt to the ground by the Chinese. And he was called to Beijing by the emperor. And when he was asked to account for himself, he stood up for himself with such pluck that he was not only allowed to live, but, you know, they appreciated his pluck. And he ended up being instructed in Tibetan Buddhism in Beijing. And a young man, but child, his own age, from the royal family, was in his class. And he became good friends with him. And the child became the emperor. And so Jangkya had a easy route in, so to speak, but it's his own personality, to have tremendous influence with the emperor and in the court thereby. And he himself learned, although he was of Mongolian extraction, which gave him Mongolian, he learned Manchurian, he was Manchurian, but well, no, he wasn't Manchurian. He was Mongolian. He was Khalkha-Mongolian, and learned Manchurian and a couple other languages of the area. And he ended up translating. He had a team of translators, and he was not somebody in the distance, the sort of the overlord of, which is often the case with these, the grand editor who really organizes but doesn't do that much work. He was intimately involved, and but his activities with the Benchen Lama and with the Dalai Lamas and selected by Giant Sheba and then involved with the new Giant Sheba and the interweavings with so many of the previous and then the following, and chosen by the previous and involved with the following. It's just so interesting to, again, follow, even though I wrote this up. Nobody put it together in one specific piece except myself, gathering it from here and there. I'm not saying that was any great feat. I was just putting together items from that I received from others. And eventually, I'll skip over who could remember all of it, even just having read it. Later in his life, his eyesight became very poor, such that even with his own writings, somebody else would have to read them out. But if one listened to him as he was muttering his own writings, he was ahead of the person who was reading them. In other words, he was reciting them, and his writings were copious. And he would go into a temple and identify something with one of the previous pabongas. He was obviously previous, because this is the 18th century. He spoke of a image that pabonga himself had not noticed in his own temple, even though his sight was poor. And at one point, to show his own meditative prowess, he asked his helper to bring a bowl, and he put it upside down on his head for a short period of time and give it back to his helper, which was so hot his helper could not handle it. And he said, "That is a sign of my prowess." So one of the monastics made a joke about him when he was in another temple and he could identify the material of statues even though his sight was so bad. And a monastic made a joke. How could there be a Buddha who could, with his, you see, he would wave his hand and understand the substance of the statue, who could see with his body, his body sense power, his body consciousness, who could see with his body consciousness, but not see with his eyes. Because you see, Buddha's consciousnesses are cross-functional. So Here's the Buddha who couldn't see with his eyes, but could see with his hands. Anyway, but when one reads, when I was reading about his extraordinary activities, just almost like on the go, and then the emperor calling him back, "Get back here." Just and it's, I feel the same way about His Holiness. His activities throughout the day are there's so many. He's on the go, and even his staff. Nobody on his staff knew everything that he was doing, and I know that because some persons in his staff would ask me, would try to fill in his schedule by asking me if I knew some things that he was doing. It's not that I knew everything, but they'd have to ask, various people who dealt with him in order to fill in what he was doing. So, and so interesting in the at Wu Taishan, the five peak range, famous for, it's associated with Manjushri in China. When Jangkya insisted that he told them what to do with his ashes. He left that, he told them what to do, but the emperor said, "I won't do that. He's too great. He's too powerful." And so the emperor you have to read the detail. And the emperor did all these marvelous things. And he built this marvelous small temple under the ground, and built a temple over it. And he said he wanted this done because there would be sinful persons in the future who would destroy. You see, it's hidden underground. And I felt sort of guilty about publishing where this stuff was, full of precious stones and gold, and it even gives the weight of the gold that went into this special, I don't know, the statue, or it's there. It's all written there. But as far as I know, nobody's gone in. It will be unearthed, I imagine, at one point. If I make enough noise about it. But given how the Chinese have preserved certain parts of what they could turn into museums and charge people for, they probably would not destroy it. Anyway. So, and Jang-kya conducted a highest yoga tantra initiation for the emperor, who, like Chögyal Pakpa of the Sakya lineage, with the emperor at that point, earlier, of course, bowed to Chögyal Pakpa. And in this case, the Qianlong emperor had to bow or did bow, I'm sure, most willingly to Jangkya. Of course, Tibetans find that, are proud of this. So when I went of the 5 times I went to China and Tibet, on one occasion I was with one or two, yes. I was with a group lecturing, and we were taken to an art shop, and there was what I would call a tanka of the Qianlong Emperor. So of course I had to buy it, and it's in my bedroom, along with another Chinese tanka on the west wall.
Is there someone who's said to be his incarnation?
Who?
Is there somebody now who is said to be Jangkya's incarnation?
I don't know. I was appalled when I learned that there's somebody who's said to be Nagarjuna's incarnation. I just thought, well, that's too much. Jangkya I can see. Oh yeah, of course. I'm sorry. That's a very stupid answer of mine. He came to the gathering when we were there last fall. Jangkya's incarnation. Yeah, and he stole my ride back to Gomang. He had a party at 6, so he got my ride. He stole my car. Now I say he stole. That's my joke. So of course Gomang gave him my car. Gomang gave him my car. So I say he stole my car. He was more important than myself. So I got to ride. I didn't work my way. Somebody offered me a ride in a Loseling car. They had several cars, I was told. And in fact, I think Hongming would probably remember. I think, in fact, I had an empty car back to Goma. And I think they did send Jangkya's car back too. He had 6 people, so it's quite understandable. And then, while we were eating dinner with the Chinese patron, he was up on the stage with us, sitting in the absolute first row. The first row was not in like the first row. I was, in the small chairs. I was in the first row with Joshua. And there was another first row sitting in big chairs who were patrons, sponsors of various things. And the Chinese patron was sitting in that row. And he was staying in the absolute best rooms in the dining hall, the building itself, whereas Hongming and I were in the library guest rooms in a different building. And we got to know him some because, of course, Hongming could converse with him. Now, how did I get off on him? But in any case, why was that even brought up.
Jangkya.
Oh yeah, Jangkya. Now Jangkya was staying there in a different room, or maybe, oh yes, the Chinese patron had left. His Holiness had told him to leave. He's a student of His Holiness. And Jangkya then was in that. It was in that suite of rooms. I went into the rooms before. I was there earlier than any of them. And I wandered in there just to see what that. There's two nice rooms, just to see what those rooms were like. You know, I'm sticking my head in where it didn't belong, I guess. I don't know. And Jangkya must have been Jangkya. So he came out into the, I don't know, the room you pass through to get to the dining room. And I don't know if he came there in order to entice me to come say hello to him. And I thought, oh, that must be Jangkya. He was dressed in layman's clothing. And kind of looked as if, oh, I thought that must be Jangkya. Jangkya Hotutu incarnation, Jugu. And but I didn't get up from my seat. I was a bit tired, and maybe I was thinking, you stole my car. But I've regretted since then not getting up and going in there and just striking up a conversation. But I couldn't think of how to say, are you Jangkya Rinpoche? You know, it's just, I don't know how to say that, you know? I mean, it's not, if I were more aggressive, you know, but it seemed like sort of a dumb thing to say. It's not the kind of thing I'd say. In Taipei, I went to where my teacher, one of my three teachers of Jonang was staying. And I went to visit him, and with him was the head of Jonang. And I had no idea who this person was. And I didn't want to say, who's this guy? But I also felt, you know, this guy looks as if he's important. But I was never introduced. But he was there. It was for the two of us to meet. Because I had translated the great text of Jonang, you know, the Richung Edung Gyatso, the ocean of definitive meaning. And I had translated their text, you know, big, thick thing in English. And so we just had a very pleasant conversation. But I never took a blessing from him, or not that I necessarily would. I tend even when I go to visit an abbot, and I know it's the abbot, I don't rush in and bow down and do the usual thing. But anyway. So later I found out he was the head of the whole. It's a huge sect in eastern Tibet. Anyway, that takes up half of our time. Oh, I'm so sorry. That's all I have time for. You asked for it. The garrulous Jeffrey. So, in some, which I translate as in one aspect. I translate it very literally in Kön-chog-jig-me-wang-po's commentary. In that biography, it said that Kön-chog-jig-me-wang-po presented this commentary to Jangkya, and Jangkya read it through and was delighted with it. In other words, he didn't throw it back in his face, but also it didn't say that he went through it and made corrections and then gave it back to him. Yeah, it just didn't. That wasn't said. So we don't know if he did or did not make corrections. But he was delighted with it. So he's hoping to become liberated from cyclic existence through the kindness of just aged mama, the emptiness of inherent existence. Now, of course, he's, he sometimes is being the opposite of inflated. Humble. So whether he's being humble, saying he's hoping to become liberated, or he's giving an honest assessment of his own situation. Who knows here? The emptiness. Because, so if phenomena existed the way they appear, there's no way we could become liberated. There's no way anyone could help us become liberated. And that's very important. And sometimes people say to us, well, this is just the way things are. We can't get out of this mess. There's no such thing as liberation. It's insane of you to think that there is some way to become liberated. Sigmund Freud, for instance, this is what, we're stuck in. Desire and hatred. This is the fabric of our lives. The warp and woof. A carpet is made of strands going in two directions. You take out the strands and there's nothing. Because if these phenomena that are included with object and subject, and I keep the order, apprehendeds and apprehenders, because I don't know, that's the way it is. That's the way what the text says. It puts it in that order. And I don't turn it around and put it in the usual order in English. Subjects and objects, but objects and subjects. All right, why not? Get in the groove. We're established in the way they appear to us. We're established this way. So much in and of themselves, existing from their own side. You might be able to push them around a little, or arrange them a little, but that's it. Or maybe even arrange them a lot. You've got a big boulder, you're building a new temple, and there's a big boulder, so you arrange the boulders, and you make a garden of boulders. That's what my mother did. and the area where we live, were a bunch of boulders. And she, being artistic, said, well, bring them over to our property. You know, we had 2 house lots, you say in our dialect, lots, 100 by 100 feet, not yards, feet. And, you know, she had them put in the corner of the second lot near the first lot. And I used to go climb on them. They were great. She was smart. You can arrange them some, maybe even have some fun with them. And then when in Providence, they stupidly removed all of the, what are those blocks called? You know, the roads used to be made from blocks of stone. Cobblestones. And she thought, oh, let's get some of those cobblestones. And had you know, part of a truckload or a truckload brought down to that second lot, and I made a walkway. I made a fireplace out near those rocks, and to burn trash, and you know, put steel or iron, whatever. Put a grid in it to let the ash fall, and then built a walkway out to a path out to, you know, blah blah. I'm showing off. You know, give you a chance to show off. There would not be a method to be protected. No way to be protected. Even by the victors of the 3 times. What's the order? What's the order of the 3 times? If you do it the way we usually do it, it's past, present, and future, but is it? De maung tadeva. Tadawa, sorry. So past, future, and present. There would not be a method, okay. Such couldn't find it. Couldn't find it anywhere. If you're born in a place like Barrington, Rhode Island, it'd be like being born there. Although you could go to church and they'd tell you God could do it. Creator God. If you're somebody like me, you'd ask him, well, if God's so powerful, why didn't he do it already? Mm-hmm. And they'd say, don't ask things like that. The evidence for this, moreover, is that if these phenomena of apprehendeds and apprehenders were established in just the way they appeared, they would have to be established from their own side. Which means they wouldn't depend on anything. Wow. That's a step. What do you mean they wouldn't depend on anything? You have to plant corn, you know, slice off the corn from the, you know, corn seed, which is just corn, for the next crop of corn to grow. Any farmer knows that. My grandfather knew that. You got to plant corn to get corn. Got to plant corn to get corn. He didn't talk that way. But my uncle who took over for him did. Got to plant corn to get corn. You got to feed a cow to get milk. You got to let him out of the barn to find the hay. to find the grass to eat, to get milk. You want to get milk, you got to call them back in. He used to show me his hands, you know, because he was milking by hand, and they were frozen like this. They were frozen like this. So I guess he could move it enough, you know, to get his hand around the teat. He sort of, he'd like put this in your face. He didn't squeeze it. It's sort of like kind of pathetic, you know? Like, this is what's happened to my hand. And if the establishment, they would be established without reliance upon even anything. Wow! Now, we wouldn't say that, you see? We wouldn't say that if you ask us. And in that case, there would be no removal of defects. But you see, even people say that, you see. There's something in the way things look that cause people to say, well, you know, you took some medicine, so that removed some of those side effects that you had, but you can't remove all defects. All the crap of this, you know, being born into this mess. You see? There'd be no removal of defects. You see, Buddha had said, see, the words that are used here are what we speak of Buddha as having removed all defects and is endowed with all good qualities. The words being used here speak right to what's said about Buddhas. So you have to translate it with words that fit into what's said about Buddhas. Defects, removal of defects, has removed all defects and has attained all good qualities. And then the word increase also is, I think even in the Heart Sutra. And Dharmakirti and qualities and the attainment of the status of liberation and omniscience. So it's like dream on in your illusion. There'll be no way. But now he's going to use some very interesting vocabulary. So Nagarjuna, as we read earlier in the book, for whom emptiness is suitable, all is suitable. Remember that? Mm-hmm. For whom emptiness is not suitable, all is not suitable. Remember, someone in Nagarjuna's treatise, the lower school folk argue against Nagarjuna. The Four Noble Truths aren't suitable for you because you say everything's empty. And then Nagarjuna turns this back on you, on them. For you it's not suitable because you say things exist from their own side. You say things exist in their own right. And then, there's a good deal of detail in it. We won't repeat that because I'm sure you've memorized it. Now, even though there are these titles appear in the midst of what's just poetry. Because these various changes, now this is really fantastic, because these various changes are manifestations of changeless mama, because these various changes are manifestations of emptiness. There is release. Wow. Because these various changes are manifestations of changeless mama emptiness. Wow. We're supposed to see this stuff around us that is changing as the sport, the manifestation of changeless emptiness. Wow. Fantastic. Wow. How stunning. He puts it right there. So if it were true that these apprehendeds and apprehenders were established from their own side in accordance with how they appear to us, release from cyclic existence, from the mess that we're drawn into by accepting how they appear to us, the afflictive desire and hatred that we're drawn into because we accept how they appear to us as being true. Release from this mess would be impossible. But these dependently arisen changes are manifestations of mama. The changeless emptiness, changeless always, changeless in all conditions, changeless in all circumstances. Mama emptiness of inherent existence. Mama that we just think is this aged, wrinkly, even ugly. When I first saw my grandmother, I was in my mother's arms. She was holding me up here, and I was turned so I could see her. And I knew, this is Grandma. This, who she was. I didn't think Grandma, but I knew. I knew this was who she was, who she is. And her face was, lined. She wasn't fat or anything. And I cried. She's so ugly. Not because I felt sorry. My brain, my emotions were tied to my body, even though, I remember to right now. And I felt so bad that I was crying because I knew who she was. So ugly that it just made me, to see something so ugly made me cry. Something that ugly. And she was outside the kitchen door, the kitchen side of this house, in this nice surrounding. So that must, if I was born at the end of September, must have been the summer. So, the grass was green. It was a nice day, afternoon. Everything was nice, except this ugly grandma. Anyway, emptiness of inherent existence. At all times, all of this stuff is a manifestation, not a distant, it's not a distant manifestation. It's not ugly. This was the paucity of my view, my inner view. I saw only the outer, the beautiful and the ugly, the beautiful surroundings and the ugly. No. I was not some great, no matter how much I was aware, and no matter how much even I remember so vividly now, it's still stupid. Hence, in dependence upon wisdom. What wisdom? Directly realizing or even realizing. Non-establishment of these things from their own side. So you see the vividness of emptiness is what's this absence was what, I don't mean to turn it into something beautiful and ugly. I don't mean that. I mean it should be this absence, and even the mind of clear light appearing at this time. Why not? Also, clear light even appearing at this time. Maybe even not just an absence, but also clear light. How nice that would be also. But certainly the absence of, manifestation. Everything is a manifestation of that absence, which I was incapable of doing. No matter how nice it might be to have such a clarity of mind as I had, that's nowhere near enough. Really. That's non-existence, absence of existence, by way of their own being, whereas we see them as existing by way of their own being, by way of their own side. So then we're scared shitless. I was scared shitless. I didn't shit in my pants, in my diaper, but scared shitless by just some, ugliness. So my grandmother was disappointed at seeing her Jeffrey. And, I have a letter from from my grandmother to my mother, celebrating my birth before she saw me. I have the letter. I have it over there, actually. I brought it back from Boonesville, Virginia. The root of mundane existence, Siba, Sibetzawa, in Tibetan is Sibetzawa. So mundane existence is another word for cyclic existence. Cyclic. Over and over and over again. The continuum of ignorance. So hence in dependence upon this wisdom seeing what? The absence of establishment, non-establishment from their own side. In dependence on that wisdom, this stream, this continuum, a lot of people translate it as stream, why not? This continuum of ignorance is severed, broken, cut. Can you imagine? Cut! Whereby one is released from cyclic existence. Well, in dependence upon it, seeing it once is not enough for release. Seeing it once is enough for release from the artificial afflictive emotions, right? Artificial afflictive emotions are ones that are learned. It's really difficult to posit what's learned and what's natural. So you can see why now he's going to talk about manifestations in B of appearance and emptiness. Wow. Isn't it beautiful? As Kön-chog-jig-me-wang-po says at the beginning, Jangkya's words are difficult to penetrate. So he wanted to write a commentary that is based on the words. And so he humbly says it's a word commentary. Well, it's a word commentary and a meaning commentary. A meaning commentary that is built on exposing the meaning of the words. He could call it a meaning commentary, but he humbly calls it he does call it, isn't it? It is in the lamp for the words. No, it's just lamp for the words. But he does say the meaning. And it's a lamp for the words in that it's illuminating the words, which then we find is the meaning of the words. And I haven't re-listened to his much of His Holiness's commentary that he gave at Drebung in 1980, but the small part that I have re-listened to is he uses it's not he doesn't spend I'll go out on a limb and say he uses the stanzas as prompters for talking about, that trigger. What's our word for trigger?
Spark.
What?
Spark.
That spark discourse on reflections on meanings, deep meanings in the consequence school, rather than getting into specific words. And I'm sure you all would be delighted to see what it brings up. And I'm out on a limb by saying, as far as little words, sparking out of and telling you what specific words that you'd really like to know in the poem. I don't believe that I will find that's there. But it's just magnificent in that it talks to what we've just been studying in these commentaries on emptiness and dependent arising. It's a magnificent, what it sparks is really lovely. And so after reading this and this magnificent leading off from magnificently deep leadings from the words of the poem, it would be very nice to see.